It was my dream to open a dental office, and it came true here in Berlin. The first time I went to a dentist here, I didn't know any German, and I felt absolutely dreadful. I almost cried. And at that moment, I thought to myself, I don't want other Latinos or Colombians or any other Spanish speakers to have to go through what I went through.
Jaqueline Rojas first came to Berlin in 1990 with her then husband, a student at a German university. At that time, she couldn't speak a word of German. Jaqueline and her husband eventually divorced, but she stayed on in Germany. After having cut her studies short in Colombia, she returned to dental school in Berlin. Today, she shares a practice with a German dentist.
What I really like about Berlin is the feeling of freedom you can experience here. You're free to think as you wish, move around as you like. Here I feel I can do whatever I want and be whoever I want to be. Things are totally different in Colombia.
Nearly every year, Jaqueline travels to the country of her birth, Colombia, and when she can, she visits the church on Mount Monserrate, overlooking the capital, Bogota.
When I was 7 years old, I was hit by a car, and at first my chances of recovery didn't look so good. My father prayed a lot and made a promise that if I got better and could walk well again, the whole family would come here to Montserrat and fulfill that promise. It brings back a lot of memories when I come here.
Bogota is the next stop on Jaqueline's journey. A melting pot situated in a basin in the Andes Mountains, very little is left of the city's one-time colonial charm. Over 9.5 million people are packed into this megalopolis, with more arriving all the time. Many are refugees from rural areas where guerrilla and paramilitary groups, drug rings, and Colombian army forces are still fighting for control of resources and power. It's estimated that more than 3 million Colombians are refugees in their own country. One of Jaqueline's rituals during her trips to Colombia is to have a shoe shiner give her boots a polish. But it's not just shiny shoes she's after. The media here often publish a very slanted view of events. One way to balance it out is to talk to people in the streets.
Has security here gotten better or worse?
Here in the city centre it's become better, but in the neighbourhoods on the edge of town the situation's very bad, partly because of the economy. It's forcing many people to work on the streets. Competition is tough and earnings are very poor. So those working out on the streets have to make a huge effort.
It's really admirable how people like him find ways to increase their incomes in order to feed their families, or even provide their children with an education. That's the way it is with lots of people who work in the streets. They have a strong will and put everything they've got into making a living.
Luis the shoe shiner earns about 600,000 pesos, less than 240 euros each month.
Bogota used to be very chaotic. With all the traffic jams, it could take forever to cross the city. It was congested and very dirty. But I think the Colombians have figured out that things can only get better with good organization and respect for others.
But the city is growing faster than planners can keep up. Every year, 80,000 more cars are added to the already overcrowded streets. Jaqueline has a date with her cousin, Ana Maria Garcia, in a cafe in Bogota's Old Town.
I see Ana Maria almost every year when I come back to Colombia. I've known her ever since we were kids. I even babysat her and her little sister. To me, they're family.
32-year-old Ana Maria Garcia is a grandniece of the Nobel Prize-winning author Gabriel Garcia Marquez. She's trying to establish herself as an artist in Bogota.
Art in Colombia is actually quite good, but it's also very exclusive. Only certain people have the means to buy art. It's a luxury, because most of the people here are struggling just to buy the bare necessities.
Ana Maria works as a photographer who then digitally processes pictures. Her own work has been shown in Mexico, Panama, and other countries. Some works have fetched prices equivalent to a few thousand euros. Ana Maria's studio is a meeting point for many unknown artists and a few who have made a name for themselves, like 45-year-old Jona Rojano. He's one of the few successful artists with an indigenous background. He takes a critical view of current developments in Colombia, especially of the government's neoliberal economic policies.
Colombian society is very ignorant when it comes to the visual arts. Capitalism devours everything.
Can't the government support the arts?
We don't have a very enlightened government that would help artists. If you've got a nice house and its inhabitants have no culture, then the house falls down, you see. Here you have to go begging, but I wasn't born to beg.
Those who publicly criticize political conditions in Colombia live dangerously. Union activists, journalists, artists, anyone who gets politically involved can face intimidation and even death threats. Artist Walbert Perez has made the violence in his country a theme in his paintings.
For 3 years now, I've been gathering information about what's going on here from discussions and the media. And I feel more and more that as an artist, I can't remain silent. Even as a child, all I ever heard about was death and massacres, and how the guerrillas were killing people and taking away their livestock. My father's entire family were farmers, and they lost everything, including their farm. At the age of 50 or 60, those poor people were left with nothing. They had to give it all up.
The next day, Jaqueline sets out for her home city, Bucaramanga. Outside Bogota, she passes a military checkpoint. Just a few years ago, it was still very dangerous to drive through Colombia. Many parts of the country were in the hands of paramilitary or guerrilla forces.
Security in Colombia has gotten a lot better. There were times when I would have been afraid, but the military checkpoints along the way help give me the feeling that I'm protected, that nothing can happen to me here. It gives us a sense of freedom in our own country that, unfortunately, still has problems.
After 4 hours on the road, Jaqueline arrives at the town of Chiquinquirá, a key religious site in Colombia. It's believed that over 4 centuries ago, the Virgin Mary appeared to a simple farmer here. Now, hundreds of thousands of the faithful make the pilgrimage to the Basilica every year. Jaqueline is herself a devout Catholic, along with over 80% of Colombia's 45 million people. Jaqueline asks a Dominican monk, Father Narcisco Gomez, to bless some rosaries for her.
God, Father of merciful love, pour forth thy blessings upon thy daughter Jaqueline, upon her hands, upon her work, so that her deeds will be a sign of the blessings, protection and love of God.
Most Colombians are deeply religious and attend Mass regularly. But here too, the scandals over misuse of authority and sexual abuse have dealt a severe blow to the reputation of the Catholic Church.
I believe the Catholic Church is aware that it has to renew itself, not in its principles, but the people. The Catholics themselves have to renew themselves. What I want to say is that we as Catholics have to practice what we preach.
From Chiquinquirá, the journey continues northeast across the high valleys of the Cordillera Oriental, or eastern range of the Andes. After 200 kilometers twisting and turning through the mountains, Jaqueline comes to Socorro, a town she often visited with her family when she was a little girl. Today she wants to visit her aunt. It was in her house that Jaqueline had her very first experience with something she now deals with on a daily basis in her job: medicine.
Igualmente, mucha salud y muchos éxitos.
Gracias.
Papis.
Bien, está muy bien, gracias. Sí.
Jaqueline's Aunt Berta de Rogeles runs the town's oldest pharmacy. It was started by Jaqueline's grandfather. In Colombia, the pharmacies are called drogerias, or drugstores. They sell almost any medication without a prescription, a practice left over from the days when there were hardly any doctors in rural areas. As a little girl, Jaqueline got to watch her grandfather mix his own medicines in the cellar under the shop.
To me, a visit to my grandpa's pharmacy was like going to Disneyland for an American kid. I was fascinated with all these little drawers and how colorful it all was, and with all the medicines with their odd names, and just with the smell of the medicine. Maybe that had an influence on my career choice later on. When I'm in my practice and notice the smell of medicine, then I feel secure.
Jaqueline and her aunt have a lot more to talk about than stories of days gone by. They also discuss the health problems afflicting the population of Colombia nowadays. Aunt Berta says eating habits have changed radically, with drastic consequences.
People today are suffering from rheumatism, gout and cancer. People used to be quite a lot healthier than they are now. My father, for instance, died at the age of 80 years and 7 months. He was strong as an oak.
Jaqueline arrives in the next village, Simacota, just in time for the town festival. A bullfight is the highlight of the event. The Spanish brought the tradition of bullfighting to Latin America, and it struck deep roots in Colombia.
We see the torero not as a coward, but just the opposite, a symbol of courage. He dares to face an enraged animal and play with it. And if you've experienced that as a child, you don't associate it with violence, but with the fiesta. You associate it with fun and a chance to meet with family and friends.
In this case, the bullfight mainly provides a backdrop for the visitor's enjoyment. In many other arenas in the countryside, and especially in major cities, a bullfight still ends with a dead bull. But in Simacota, the bull leaves the arena alive. In Colombia, too, animal rights activists are making headway. The last leg of the journey takes Jaqueline through some more spectacular mountain scenery. The Chicamocha Canyon is the biggest in Colombia. From here, it's only about 120 kilometers to Jaqueline's hometown, Bucaramanga, where she spent the first 21 years of her life. Bucaramanga is the prosperous capital of Santander Department, with more than 1 million people in its metropolitan area. Its economy is based on trade with nearby Venezuela. It has a reputation of being safe and clean compared to other major Colombian cities. But all around the outskirts of Bucaramanga, slums are proliferating, a consequence of uncontrolled population growth and people being driven from their homes in the country. They're forced to settle in areas not fit for habitation. Every year during the rainy season, hundreds or even thousands of people die in mudslides, most of them poor. Jaqueline's family has long been politically active. During 10 years as mayor and city councilor, her father dedicated his efforts to narrowing the gap between rich and poor. On a finca, a ranch in the mountains, Jaqueline sees her parents again for the first time in a year. Every year, usually on Epiphany, January the 6th, the family arranges a big gathering. Relatives from all over, even from abroad, attend if they can. Jaqueline's parents have also left Colombia. They moved to Venezuela in 1996 for their own safety. Her father, Jose, had been kidnapped by left-wing guerrillas and released after a ransom was paid.
I love Colombia. It's a very beautiful country. But for over 60 years now, it's had a problem. The guerrillas. You can't fight the guerrillas with violence. You can only fight them with social projects. The people living at the edges of society have to be reintegrated. They have to be able to get an education so they can get jobs and not hang out on the streets and turn criminal. That's the solution for Colombia.
Colombia is notorious for kidnappings, but the numbers have dropped radically from about 3,500 in 2000 to under 300 in 2010.
My father has
the character of a politician. He used to be one years ago. I've always known him as a public figure. He used to take me along during election campaigns and to his speeches. And I've always known him as someone who identifies very strongly with Santander, someone who fights very hard for the rights of disadvantaged people. To me, that's always been a very strong motivation in my own life.
For Jaqueline, the hardest part of every trip to Bucaramanga is the visit to her brother's grave. In 1987, at the age of 23, Jesus Oswaldo Rojas was killed in an automobile accident. The cemetery personnel tend the grave for most of the year.
My family is my greatest support. I miss that a lot in Germany. And that may be what I'm looking for when I come back, this love, this closeness and support that give me the strength I need to keep on living in Germany.
Jaqueline goes to visit her best friend in Bucaramanga. Pilar Galvis lives in an apartment block in the center of town. The women have known each other since primary school. They even went to dental college together. In spite of the geographical distance between them, their friendship is closer than ever. Over the years, Jaqueline has described her life in Berlin in long letters to Pilar. After reminiscing for a while, Pilar suggests that Jaqueline have a look at where she works at her new job in the nearby town of Giron. Giron is a colonial town that grew rich on the tobacco grown in the region. Pilar works in a medical center that caters to patients covered by national health insurance. In Colombia, employers are required to register their staff with a national health insurance company. Then, when the workers need health care, they can't go to doctors and clinics of their own choosing, but only those under contract with their insurance companies. The treatment may be affordable, but it can also be rather basic. Several patients might even receive treatment in the same room, separated only by a screen. By European standards, the conditions are fairly rudimentary. Dentists under contract with such facilities earn a fixed salary of about 1,000 euros a month. Many of them hold down 2 jobs.
Most of the doctors here work under contract and maintain a private practice on the side. But I work only here, and the rest of the time I look after my family.
The idea of a dentist having 2 jobs, that they might work for these state medical centers from, say, 6 a.m. to 1 p.m., and then after a short lunch break, work in their own practices on private patients from 2 to 8 p.m., even on Saturdays, well, I think that's pretty tough.
Coming back to Colombia once a year for a visit is one thing, but returning permanently to live and work is something Jaqueline can't imagine. Studying in Germany and establishing herself there professionally cost her a lot of time and effort. She's accomplished something that few of her colleagues in Colombia could even dream of. Something Jaqueline wouldn't give up easily.
Meine Heimat ist, wo mein Herz ist.
My home is where my heart is, and my heart belongs to two places, Bucaramanga and Berlin. Bucaramanga is where I spent my childhood and where I first fell in love. But when I left for Germany, my second life started. And I'm inseparably connected to Berlin, because I arrived there in 1990, just when Berlin was also undergoing a transformation. Two worlds came together, just like two worlds were coming together in my own head.